November 29, 1944. 3:17 a.m. Pacific Ocean, 12 miles off Tokyo Bay. The water is black glass. No moon. No stars. Just the hum of diesel engines cutting through silence. Commander Joseph Enright stands in the conning tower of USS Archerfish, his hands trembling slightly against the cold metal. Before him, impossibly large, moves a shadow that shouldn't exist. A shape so massive it seems to bend the darkness around it. He has been chasing this ghost for 6 hours. His crew thinks he's losing his mind. Naval intelligence will later tell him he saw nothing. But Enright knows what he's looking at. Through the spray and the dark, through every doubt that has ever haunted him, he knows. This is his second chance. His only chance. And in 17 minutes, he will change the course of naval warfare forever, by sinking a ship the world doesn't even know exists. But to understand how a disgraced submarine commander came to hunt the largest aircraft carrier ever built, we need to go back. Back to a moment of devastating failure. Back to when Joseph Enright was ready to quit. 1 year earlier. November 15, 1943. Enright stood in the control room of USS Dace, his first real command. The message had come through Ultra, the Allies' secret code-breaking operation. A Japanese aircraft carrier, the Shokaku, was moving through his patrol area. A carrier. The kind of target every submarine commander dreams of. 29,000 tons of Japanese naval power. His crew was ready. Torpedoes loaded. Position perfect. But something happened in that moment. Something Enright would replay in his mind for months. Years. Maybe forever. He hesitated. The carrier was there, vulnerable, crossing through his firing solution like a gift from the gods of war. But Enright saw the escorts, counted the destroyers, calculated the risk. And in his calculations, doubt crept in like seawater through a crack. "Too dangerous," he told his executive officer. "We'll wait for a better position." Daylight came. The Shokaku disappeared over the horizon. And Joseph Enright wrote the most devastating 6 words of his career in the patrol report. "I request to be relieved by an officer who can perform more satisfactorily." He didn't wait to be fired. He fired himself. The Navy, remarkably, granted his request. They sent him to Midway Atoll, to a desk, to paperwork, to the kind of administrative purgatory where careers go to die. At 33 years old, Lieutenant Commander Joseph Francis Enright was finished. The son of North Dakota. Naval Academy class of 1933. A man who had wanted nothing more than to command submarines in combat. And he had quit. His fellow officers whispered. Some respected his honesty. Others saw weakness. The submarines kept going out on patrol, kept sinking Japanese shipping, kept winning the war in the Pacific. Without him. For 6 months, Enright shuffled papers, filed reports, watched younger commanders return to port with victory pennants flying, 1 flag for each ship sunk. He attended the briefings, heard the stories, felt the weight of his own absence. His wife wrote letters. Encouraging. Patient. But even she couldn't hide the question beneath the words. What happened to you? Enright didn't have an answer. But deep in the bureaucratic maze of the submarine service, Admiral Charles Lockwood was watching. Lockwood, gruff, brilliant, unorthodox, didn't believe in throwing away good officers. He'd seen too many men crack under pressure, seen too many boats lost because captains were too aggressive, too reckless, too confident. Maybe, Lockwood thought, a man who knew his own limits was exactly the kind of man who could learn to exceed them. In September 1944, Lockwood made a call that shocked the submarine community. He gave Joseph Enright a second chance. Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, Japan, May 1940. While Enright was learning to navigate his failure, Japan was building a secret. The keel was laid in the shadows of the biggest construction project the Imperial Japanese Navy had ever attempted. Not one, not two, but 3 Yamato-class battleships, the largest, most powerful warships ever conceived. Yamato, Musashi, and the third, Shinano. Named after an ancient province, Shinano was meant to be the final word in naval dominance. 72,000 tons of armored steel. Guns so large they could fire shells weighing as much as a small car. A fortress that could stand against any enemy fleet. But then came June 4, 1942. Midway. In a single day, Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. The spine of Japanese naval air power broken. And suddenly, battleships seemed like relics of the past. The future belonged to carriers. Orders came down from the Naval General Staff. Convert Shinano. Workers dismantled what they'd built. Redesigned. Rebuilt. The battleship hull became the foundation for the largest aircraft carrier ever constructed. 8-inch armor belt. 145 anti-aircraft guns. A flight deck that could launch and recover 50 aircraft. But there was a problem. Actually, there were many problems. The conversion was rushed. Shortcuts taken. The watertight doors, critical for containing flooding after torpedo hits, were never properly tested. Never subjected to the air pressure checks that would ensure they could hold back seawater. Engineers raised concerns. They were overruled. Japan was losing the war. They needed Shinano operational. The construction was so secret that workers were confined to the shipyard. Signs were posted, discussing the ship meant death. No photographs were allowed. When American B-29 reconnaissance planes began flying over Tokyo in 1944, workers erected a massive roof over the entire drydock, one of the largest camouflage efforts in history. Allied intelligence knew something was being built, but they didn't know what. Even when a captured Japanese aviator mentioned a 3rd Yamato-class vessel being converted to a carrier in July 1943, American intelligence dismissed it. Too big to be credible. Too ambitious to be real. Shinano was a ghost ship. And on November 28, 1944, she prepared to sail. Her captain was Toshio Abe, confident, experienced, and contemptuous of American submarines. Abe had studied captured American torpedoes from the Philippines. He knew their early war torpedoes had been defective. He assumed they still were. This assumption would kill him. The order came to move Shinano from Yokosuka to Kure Naval Base, a 2-day voyage around the coast of Japan. There, final systems would be installed, aircraft loaded, crew trained. Then Shinano would enter combat. But Abe didn't want to go. The ship wasn't ready. The pumps weren't working. The fire suppression systems were incomplete. The crew was largely inexperienced. Many were fresh from training, had never been to sea. He requested a delay. He was denied. American B-29s were bombing Tokyo now. The risk of Shinano being caught in port was too great. She had to leave. Tonight, in the dark. At 6 p.m. on November 28, 1944, Shinano slipped her moorings. 3 destroyers escorted her, Isokes, Hamakes, Yukikes. Elite vessels, fast and deadly. Abe ordered a zigzag course. Standard anti-submarine procedure. He believed his ship could outrun any American sub, could survive any torpedo attack. Shinano was armored to withstand 20 torpedo hits. She was unsinkable. 11 hours later, Shinano's lookout screamed into the darkness. "Periscope! Starboard bow!" But when officers looked, they saw nothing. Just waves colliding. Just imagination. They never saw USS Archerfish, sitting 4 miles away, tracking them on radar. November 28, 1944. 8:48 p.m. Contact! Surface contact. Bearing 350, range 24,700 yards. The radar operator's voice cut through Archerfish's control room. Enright grabbed the microphone. "What's the speed?" "Making 18, maybe 20 knots, sir." "Big. Really big." Enright climbed to the bridge. Grabbed binoculars. Scanned the black horizon. There. A shape. Low to the water but massive. And fast. Faster than most cargo ships. Faster than anything that should be moving through these waters at night. "Tanker," someone said. But Enright kept watching. The silhouette was wrong. Too low. Too wide. "That's not a tanker," he said quietly. "That's a carrier." His executive officer stared at him. "Sir, intelligence says there are no carriers in this area." "I don't care what intelligence says. Look at it." And there it was, the unmistakable profile of an aircraft carrier's island structure. The flat deck. The escort destroyers cutting through the water alongside. Enright made his decision in seconds. Battle stations. All ahead flank. We're taking her. What followed was 6 of the most grueling hours in submarine warfare. Archerfish could make 19 knots on the surface, her maximum speed, engines screaming, diesels pushing every ounce of power into the screws. But Shinano was making 20 knots. Maybe 21. The carrier was pulling ahead. Enright ran a geometric nightmare in his head. Shinano was zigzagging, turning every few minutes to throw off submarine attacks. But the zigs and zags created angles. Opportunities. If Enright could predict the pattern, he could cut across the carrier's path, get ahead, position Archerfish for a submerged attack. But the math was brutal. Archerfish surfaced in a following sea, waves breaking over the conning tower, diesel exhaust choking the men on the bridge. The submarine bucked and rolled. Below, the crew wedged themselves against bulkheads, fighting seasickness, checking torpedo tubes, waiting. Enright sent 2 contact reports to Admiral Lockwood. "Help. Get someone else in position. This thing is too fast." No response. Archerfish was alone. The hours ground past. Midnight came. Then 1 a.m. Then 2 o'clock. The carrier's silhouette grew smaller, fading toward the horizon. Enright's officers began to accept reality. They were going to lose this race. But Enright kept watching the zigs and zags. Kept plotting. Kept running calculations. And then, at 2:56 a.m., Shinano turned. Not a zig. Not a zag. A full course change, turning southwest, directly toward Archerfish's position. Enright stared. He didn't trust it. Was this a trap? Did they know he was here? But the carrier kept coming. 8 minutes later, Enright gave the order. "Dive. Make ready all tubes." Archerfish slipped beneath the surface. The sea swallowed them. Silence replaced the thunder of diesel engines. Just the hum of electric motors. The ping of sonar. The breathing of 80 men who suddenly understood they were about to do something extraordinary. Or die trying. November 29, 1944. 3:15 a.m. Depth 60 feet. Level trim. Enright gripped the periscope handles. Through the lens, Shinano filled the world. Massive. Unreal. The kind of target that appears maybe once in a war. The carrier was less than 1,400 yards away, point-blank range in submarine warfare. So close Enright could see the wake churning off the bow, could make out the shapes of crew members on deck. But something nagged at him. A memory from a conversation with Rear Admiral Freeland Dobbin months ago. Dobbin had theorized about carrier vulnerabilities. If you hit a carrier high on the hull, just below the waterline, the weight of the flight deck becomes a liability. The ship becomes top-heavy, prone to capsizing. Conventional wisdom said aim deep. Hit the machinery spaces. Sink the ship slowly. But Dobbin's theory said aim shallow. Create instability. Make the ship kill itself. Enright made his choice. Set torpedoes to run at 10 feet. His torpedo officer stared. Sir? That's 10 feet. Do it. The torpedo depths were set. Shallow. Almost at the surface. Shinano's massive hull moved across Archerfish's bow, exposing her entire starboard side. The perfect firing solution. The kind submariners pray for. Enright took one last look through the periscope. Then he spoke 4 words. Fire 1 through 6. The submarine shuddered. 6 times. 6 Mark 14 torpedoes, each carrying 650 pounds of Torpex explosive, leapt from the tubes. They left trails of bubbles. Accelerated to 46 knots. Raced toward Shinano's hull. Enright kept the periscope up. He had to see. Had to know. The first torpedo hit at 3:17 a.m. Then the second. A pause, long enough for Enright's heart to sink. Then the third and fourth, almost simultaneously. For explosions lit the night. Massive geysers of water erupted along Shinano's starboard side. The carrier shuddered. Seemed to hesitate in the water. Down scope. Take her deep. 400 feet. Archerfish dove. Depth charges followed, 14 of them, from the escort destroyers. Concussions hammered the submarine. Lights shattered. Men grabbed pipes and rails. But the charges were poorly aimed, exploding far enough away that Archerfish survived intact. Enright ordered silent running. No one spoke. No one moved unnecessarily. And in that silence, they heard it. The sound of a ship dying. Groaning. Tearing metal. Bulkheads collapsing. The awful screech of steel under impossible stress. For 47 minutes, the breaking up noises continued. Then stopped. The crew looked at each other. They knew what it meant. They'd just sunk something enormous. But what? USS Archerfish, December 15, 1944. Guam. When Archerfish returned to port, Enright submitted his patrol report. Target, aircraft carrier. Tonnage, approximately 28,000 tons. Torpedoes fired, 6. Hits, 4. Result, sunk. He included a sketch he'd made during the attack, a drawing of the carrier's profile, the details he'd seen through the periscope. Commander John Corbouz from Naval Intelligence reviewed the report. Then he delivered the verdict. I'm sorry, Joe, but Navy intelligence won't support your claim that you sank a carrier. Enright stared. What? There are no unaccounted for carriers in that area. We know where all their carriers are. You probably hit a cruiser. Maybe a large tanker. I know what I saw. Your sketch doesn't match any carrier in our identification books. Because Shinano wasn't in their identification books. Because Shinano was a secret. Because Allied intelligence, brilliant as it was, had failed to detect the construction of the largest aircraft carrier ever built. The irony was crushing. Enright had sunk the greatest target of the war, and no one believed him. They gave him credit for a 28,000-ton carrier, a consolation prize. The Navy Cross followed. Archerfish received the Presidential Unit Citation. But the whispers continued. Some officers thought Enright had misidentified his target. Others thought he'd gotten lucky. Enright knew the truth, but he couldn't prove it. The war continued. Archerfish went on more patrols. Enright commanded wolf packs. Joe's Jugheads, they called his group. But nothing compared to that night in November. Then came September 2nd, 1945. Tokyo Bay. Archerfish was one of 12 submarines invited to witness the Japanese surrender aboard USS Missouri. Enright stood on deck, watching Japanese diplomats sign the instruments of surrender, watching the war officially end. And later, when the occupation began, Enright did something remarkable. He visited Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, found Dock No. 6, where Shinano had been built, walked the same ground Japanese workers had walked, saw the massive construction facilities, tried to imagine the ship taking shape in secret. Then he talked to survivors. November 29, 1944. 3:17 a.m. to 10:57 a.m. What Enright didn't see, what he couldn't have seen from Archerfish, was what happened aboard Shinano after the torpedoes hit. Captain Abe felt the explosions, for hammer blows against his ship's hull. But he wasn't worried. Shinano was designed to survive 20 torpedo hits, for was nothing. Manageable. Maintain course and speed, he ordered. Make for Kure. This was his second fatal mistake. The first was underestimating American torpedoes. The second was overestimating his ship. Below decks, water was pouring in. Not through small holes, but through catastrophic breaches. The torpedoes had hit high on the hull, just as Enright intended, and the force had blown thousands of rivets out of their holes. Shinano's internal compartments, never properly pressure tested, began to flood. And because Abe kept the ship moving at high speed, water flooded faster. Pressure forced seawater through every crack, every weakness in the untested watertight doors. Damage control parties rushed to the flooding compartments. But they were inexperienced. They didn't know the ship's systems. Didn't know which valves to close, which doors to secure. By 4 a.m., Shinano had a noticeable list to starboard. By 6 a.m., the engine shut down. No steam. The boiler rooms were flooded. Abe finally understood. His unsinkable ship was sinking. He ordered counter-flooding, deliberately flooding compartments on the port side to balance the list. But it was too late. Too much water. Too much damage. The destroyers tried to tow Shinano, but she displaced 72,000 tons. The destroyers together displaced barely 10,000. The tow cable snapped under the strain. By 9 a.m., Shinano had no power, no steering. She was dead in the water, listing over 20 degrees. At 10:18 a.m., Abe released his crew. He didn't order them to abandon ship. Japanese naval tradition forbade such orders. He simply told them they were free to save themselves. Hundreds of men dove into the Pacific. The destroyers moved in close, picking up survivors. But the destroyer captains had orders from Abe himself. Don't pick up any sailors who cry or call for help. Such faint hearts can do the Navy no good. Pick up only the strong ones who remain calm and courageous. Men drowned within sight of rescue. At 10:55 a.m., Shinano rolled onto her side. Water rushed through the open elevator well on the flight deck, a massive opening designed to bring aircraft from the hangar to the flight deck. Now it became a funnel, sucking seawater and swimmers back into the dying ship. Shinano capsized. She sank stern first, her bow rising briefly toward the sky before sliding beneath the waves. Captain Abe went down with his ship. So did 1,435 men, officers, sailors, civilian workers. Only 1,080 survived. 17 hours and 38 minutes after leaving Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, the largest aircraft carrier ever built at that time disappeared into the Pacific Ocean. She had traveled less than 65 miles. She never carried a single operational aircraft. She never launched a single combat mission. The ship designed to survive 20 torpedo hits had been destroyed by 4. 1946 to 1949. When the war ended, Allied investigators began piecing together Japanese naval records. Ships built, ships lost, dates, tonnages, names. That's when they found Shinano. Construction documents, survivor testimonies, damage reports filed by the escort destroyers. All of it confirming what Enright had known since that November night. He had sunk the largest warship in the world. His tonnage credit was revised from 28,000 tons to 59,000 tons. Later, to 72,000 tons. The largest single target ever sunk by a submarine in the history of naval warfare. To this day, no submarine has exceeded that record. Enright's sinking of Shinano remains the greatest single submarine attack ever executed. But here's the deeper truth, it almost didn't matter. By November 1944, Japan had already lost the war. American submarines had strangled Japanese shipping routes. The merchant marine was decimated. Oil tankers didn't make it from the East Indies. Food didn't reach the home islands. Industry ground to a halt. Shinano represented desperation. A final gamble by a navy that had run out of options. The strategic impact of her sinking was minimal. Japan had lost so many carriers by that point that one more barely registered. The psychological impact, however, was devastating. Shinano was supposed to be the symbol of Japanese naval resurgence. Secret, powerful, unstoppable. And she lasted 17 hours. The silent service, American submarines, comprised less than 2% of the U.S. Navy's personnel. But they sank 30% of Japan's navy and 60% of the merchant fleet. By war's end, Japanese shipping lanes were so dangerous that convoys couldn't operate. Food shortages became famines. Factory production collapsed. The submarines won the Pacific War by attrition, by persistence, by putting men like Joseph Enright in steel tubes and sending them into waters where one mistake meant death. 52 American submarines were lost during World War II. 3,506 men died. The submarine service had the highest casualty rate of any branch, over 20%. But they never stopped hunting. July 20, 2000. Fairfax, Virginia. Joseph Enright lived to be 89 years old. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1963. Worked for Northrop Corporation, designing navigation equipment. Attended Archerfish reunions, gatherings where his crew would tell stories, drink beer, remember what they'd done together in the dark waters off Japan. 2 weeks before he died, 3 members of Archerfish's post-war crew visited him. They brought a scrapbook, pictures of the submarine, crew rosters, memorial pages for men who had died since the war. Enright, with tears in his eyes, looked through each page slowly. When he reached the crew roster, he ran his fingers down the columns of names, pausing to tell stories about men he hadn't seen in 55 years. "We were good," he said quietly. "We were really good." He died from complications after a fall. Peacefully. Surrounded by memories of the boat, and the men, and the night everything changed. His obituary ran in naval publications worldwide. Every article mentioned Shinano. Some called it luck. Others called it skill. But here's what matters. Joseph Enright failed. Spectacularly. Publicly. He had a chance to sink a carrier, and he froze. He asked to be relieved. He accepted disgrace. And then he got a second chance. How many people get second chances at their greatest failure? How many are given the opportunity to face the exact same test again, to hunt another carrier, to overcome the same doubt, to prove to themselves that failure wasn't destiny? Enright didn't just get a second chance. He got the biggest second chance in naval history. And when that moment came, at 3:17 a.m. on November 29, 1944, he didn't hesitate. He made the call. Fired the torpedoes. Changed everything. That's the real story. Not about sinking a ship. About what it takes to sink your own failure. To dive back into the darkness where you once froze. To fire. Pacific Ocean. 65 miles south of Tokyo Bay. Depth, 4,000 meters. Shinano rests on the ocean floor. She has been there for 80 years now. Alone in the dark. Crushed by pressure. Covered in silt and sediment. No one has found her. Unlike Yamato and Musashi, her sister ships, both discovered and photographed by deep-sea expeditions, Shinano remains lost. Hidden. Secret even in death. The Japanese government has never released the exact coordinates of her sinking. Some say it's respect for the dead. Others say it's shame. The shame of losing the largest carrier ever built on its maiden voyage, less than a day after leaving port. But she's down there. Somewhere in the black. A ghost ship that became a ghost. And somewhere in that darkness, if you believe in such things, maybe there's another ghost. A submarine. A small, quiet shadow that changed history. USS Archerfish was scrapped in 1968. Cut apart. Melted down. Recycled into bridges and buildings and cars. But before that happened, she served 25 years. Survived the war. Survived the Cold War. Trained new crews. Tested new technologies. And every sailor who served aboard her knew the story. They knew that on a black night in November 1944, when everything seemed impossible, their submarine had hunted the largest warship in the world. And won.